America remembers the years after the Civil War as a period of healing. A nation torn apart by violence, slowly knitting itself back together through law, industry, and political compromise. Textbooks speak of reconstruction, reconciliation, and progress. But history, when examined closely, reveals something else unfolding beneath the surface. While the war ended in 1865, another struggle quietly took its place. One not fought on battlefields, but inside offices, ledgers, and government vaults. This was a war over revenue, over influence, over who would control the machinery of the federal state as it expanded faster than it ever had before. And few scandals expose that hidden conflict more clearly than what became known as the Whiskey Ring. In the aftermath of the Civil War, the United States government faced a brutal financial reality. The war had consumed staggering resources. Railroads demanded subsidies. Veterans required pensions. Reconstruction in the South needed enforcement. And the federal treasury, though expanding, was under relentless pressure. To survive, the government leaned heavily on excise taxes, particularly on distilled spirits. Whiskey was ideal. It was widely produced, easily measured, highly taxable. By the late 1860s, alcohol taxes made up a significant share of federal revenue. Entire bureaucracies were built around measuring, recording, and taxing whiskey production. Gaugers measured output. Collectors assessed taxes. Supervisors audited records. On paper, it was a closed system. In reality, it was porous. The Whiskey Ring did not begin as a single plan. It evolved. Distillers learned that production could be underreported. Gaugers learned that measurements could be adjusted. Collectors learned which ledgers mattered and which ones didn't. Bribes filled the gaps. Cash changed hands. Paperwork was altered. And what started as small evasions grew into a coordinated enterprise. The mechanics were simple, but devastating. Distillers produced far more whiskey than they reported. Federal officials accepted bribes to falsify records. The government received a fraction of what it was owed. The difference, millions of dollars, was split between private businessmen and public servants. This was not speculation. It was arithmetic, and the scale was enormous. By the early 1870s, whiskey fraud was draining the U.S. Treasury of millions each year. At a time when every dollar mattered, entire regional networks formed. St. Louis became a major hub. Chicago and Milwaukee followed. Warehouses operated as laundering points. Bonds were forged. Tax stamps were reused. The fraud was systemic. Most importantly, it was protected. Revenue agents who tried to enforce the law found themselves transferred, sidelined, or quietly removed. Complaints vanished inside the bureaucracy. Investigations stalled before they began. And the deeper anyone looked, the more resistance they encountered. That resistance had a source. Because the Whiskey Ring did not survive on bribery alone. It survived on political loyalty. Many of the men involved were donors, party organizers, influential figures in Republican politics. The party that controlled the federal government during Reconstruction. In a nation still fragile after war, loyalty mattered, stability mattered, and exposing corruption risked fracturing coalitions that many believed the country could not afford to lose. This was the environment inherited by Benjamin Bristow when he became Secretary of the Treasury in 1874. Bristow was not a populist crusader. He was cautious, analytical. A lawyer by training, he believed in systems and evidence. And what he saw inside the Treasury disturbed him. Revenue numbers didn't align. whiskey production estimates conflicted with tax receipts. Regions with booming distilleries reported stagnant revenue. The math refused to behave. So Bristow did something unusual. He stopped trusting internal reports. He ordered independent audits. He cross-referenced warehouse inventories. He quietly tracked shipments. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Not of isolated fraud, but of coordination. Someone was warning distillers before inspections. Someone was ensuring that enforcement actions failed. Someone inside the system was protecting the ring. As Bristow pressed forward, the investigation grew increasingly sensitive. Evidence began pointing not just to regional offices, but to Washington itself. Telegrams surfaced, coded messages referencing friends, signals, and delays. Instructions passed quietly from hand to hand. The investigation was no longer about whiskey, it was about power. In May of 1875, Bristow acted. Federal raids were launched simultaneously across multiple states. Distilleries were seized, warehouses locked, records confiscated. Revenue agents arrested their own superiors. It was one of the largest federal crackdowns in American history. And almost immediately, something strange happened. The targets seemed prepared. Barrels had been moved, documents were missing. Some distillers had shut down days earlier. Others had altered records just in time. It was clear. The ring had advance warning. Bristow knew what that meant. Someone near the center of government was leaking information. The evidence pointed toward Orville E. Babcock. Babcock was not just another official. He was President Ulysses S. Grant's closest aide, a Civil War officer, a trusted confidant, a man with access to sensitive communications and the authority to influence enforcement decisions. Telegram evidence suggested that Babcock had warned ring members of upcoming raids, that he had intervened on their behalf, that he was not merely aware of the scheme, but facilitating it. Grant was informed. Publicly, the president declared support for the investigation. He promised that no guilty man would escape justice. Privately, he refused to believe that Babcock was corrupt. Loyalty forged in war weighed heavily. When Babcock was indicted, Grant took an extraordinary step. He provided a deposition in his defense, asserting his secretary's innocence. It was the first time a sitting U.S. president testified on behalf of a criminal defendant. The message was unmistakable. At trial, Babcock was acquitted. Others were not. Dozens of distillers were convicted. Lower-level revenue agents were sentenced. Careers collapsed. Names disappeared from public life. The ring was officially broken, but its core survived. The highest levels of responsibility remained untouched. No sweeping reforms followed. No structural overhaul of the revenue system occurred. Instead, the scandal was contained, narrowed to a few guilty men, while the system that enabled them continued largely unchanged. The public reaction was brief and intense, then fading. Americans were tired. The nation had endured war, assassination, financial panic, and scandal after scandal. Outrage had limits. Grant left office in 1877. Historians would later debate his role. Was he complicit, naive, loyal to a fault? The record remains inconclusive. What is clear is that corruption flourished under his administration. Not necessarily because he ordered it, but because it was tolerated. And tolerance is often enough. The whiskey ring did not collapse because the system rejected corruption. It collapsed because it grew too visible. That distinction matters. Because the ring functioned precisely as many modern conspiracies do. Quietly, legally adjacent, embedded within institutions designed to prevent it. It relied on paperwork, procedure, and the assumption that officials could be trusted. Its greatest strength was normalcy. Today, the whiskey ring is remembered as a historical scandal, a chapter in textbooks, a symbol of Gilded Age excess. But its true legacy is less comforting. It demonstrates how easily institutions can be compromised when oversight lags behind expansion, how loyalty can override accountability, how corruption does not require secrecy, only cooperation, and perhaps most unsettling of all, it shows how little must change for such systems to reappear. The names are different now, the mechanisms more sophisticated, the paperwork digital instead of inked, but the logic remains the same. Power concentrates, oversight weakens, loyalty is rewarded, silence becomes policy. And when exposure comes, the system does not collapse, it adapts. Because the most enduring conspiracies are not hidden in shadows, they are hidden in procedures, in trust, in the quiet assumption that someone else is watching. The whiskey ring was not an exception, it was a warning. And whether that warning was ever truly heeded remains an open question.